Hello and welcome to Flagstaff TV. Today we are joined by the CEO of Predator Oil and Gas, Paul Griffiths. Paul, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Catherine.
Paul, can you start by telling us what is the Magma project and why is Europe switching to LNG?
So Magma takes ordinary natural gas and liquefies it, cools it and liquefies it. So it allows it to be transported by ship to any kind of location where the gas consumer is, and particularly in our case, offshore in Ireland. And then it's regasified, and in practice, we can feed it directly into the Irish grid from offshore without any onshore installations. I think it's important to emphasize that it's independent of any pipeline, and therefore it can't be used, if you like, as geopolitical leverage as pipelines can. And lastly, I think, and very importantly, it has a very low environmental footprint compared to other forms of import of energy. And in particular, you know, it's not a slagging match, so to speak, but I think it's important that everything is put in context. So, for example, if you look at a wind turbine requires something in the order of 2,500 tons of concrete, cement, several thousand tons of steel, 45 tons of plastic that can't be recycled. So, you know, it's a fallacy to say every option is completely carbon neutral. I mean, every option has some element to it that sometimes is not disclosed as fully as we would like to disclose our options. And lastly, you asked, well, why is Europe moving to LNG? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that the current situation between despicable situation between Russia and the Ukraine means that pipeline gas is a significant security risk, and 41% reliant on Russian gas is another security risk. So LNG offers the easiest and quickest option to move gas about and get it to the places that it's needed to be for the coming winter.
Thank you. And why is Magma important for accelerating decarbonisation of Ireland's energy mix?
Okay, I think one lesson we learned from the National Energy Summit was effectively to turn the argument around. The summit was all about fossil fuel beating, although it wasn't said, it was the elephant in the room in many respects. But the issue is that when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, nobody could give a credible alternative as to where electricity would come from. And right now that is from fossil fuel, but specifically gas, which is greener than coal because it produces 50% CO2 less emissions, and greener than oil because it produces like 30% less emissions. So gas can be the fuel of choice, if you like, for the energy transition that underpins the rollout of renewables, providing a more definitive financial investment model for those wanting to invest in renewables.
And how does Magma act as a catalyst for supporting investment in Ireland's proposed expansion for wind energy?
Well, the argument is very cognizant right now is that vast amount of profits are being made from fossil fuels, and particularly gas, in the current climate. And of course, what governments don't tell you, of course, is they take a large amount of tax revenue from those profits. So if the focus were on gas during the transition and utilizing those profits for the greater good, which is investing in the renewable rollout, then of course, that's advantageous. And also it provides tax revenues to support energy subsidies to those less well off. That currently are really struggling to manage this process of the energy transition.
And how does Magma support Ireland's energy security?
So right now, Ireland's energy security is based on the rollout of wind power and also imported gas from the United Kingdom, and a declining gas source in the Corrib gas field, which is declining quite rapidly. So Magma can deliver 43% of what's called the severe peak day winter demand of gas. And that's very important because it means you can keep all the essential services and households supplied with gas during a period when gas supplies are tight. And the importance about gas supplies being tight is it forces up energy prices. As we've seen very recently, current energy prices for April were 500% higher than April last year. And we've seen the rise in energy costs in electricity, gas, etc., which hit many households extremely hard. So it does provide that level of security that currently is not provided by relying on pipelines that send or receive gas from Europe and a very tight market. It also has the ability to deliver flexibility. You can put gas into the market literally within the same day with an FSRU hooked up to a subsea pipeline in Ireland, an existing subsea pipeline. Whereas if you try to move that gas from the European Union through the UK, which is no longer a member of the European Union, then there are all kinds of timing issues in getting that gas moved quickly to Ireland, and also regulatory issues. Nobody has actually extracted gas out of storage in the EU through the UK since Brexit. So who's going to be the first to try it? Good luck there, guys.
How can Magma be rolled out so quickly ahead of other energy options for Ireland?
I guess the answer there is it utilises existing infrastructure. So, for example, we would utilise the existing Kinsale pipeline to shore and the existing Inch terminal. And because the gas is processed on the FSRU vessel, it can deliver gas directly into the pipeline at the right pressure and at the right specifications for the gas grid. So no new infrastructure is required, no new onshore infrastructure, and no significant fixed offshore infrastructure. Also, the regulatory process for these sort of facilities have been toned over many years, something like 40 years of gas production through these same facilities. So we're not breaking new ground and inventing new rules to bring gas into Ireland through this kind of system. And that gives us an advantage over all the other, even wind farms, for example, are subject to significant regulatory delay even as we speak. So those are the factors that make it easier to roll out. And that's why Europe is focused on LNG at present as well, using existing infrastructure.
Paul, can you tell us, why is Magma beneficial to the Irish energy consumer?
Well, I think this is a thorny subject when you look at it in detail, but in practice, history has told us that cheap energy keeps the lid on prices. If you don't have cheap energy, then prices are going to reflect supply and demand. So if the demand comes tight, prices get much higher. Right now, the prices are not sustainable long term for energy, and that's because the energy that we need today, not in 2050, but today, is dictated to by access to gas supplies. So if Ireland had more gas and could generate more electricity from that gas, and that they could get that gas in summer when summer gas prices were lower compared to winter, then that has to be good for energy prices. The profits from that business in terms of the tax that the government would take could be reinvested in the renewable rollout and also in providing support for those less fortunate and can't absorb the energy price rises that we're seeing today, which is about probably 90% of the population of Ireland at present.
And what levels of gross revenue can Magma generate?
So at today's prices, or I think it was 152 pence a therm today, it works out about 1.66 billion euros a year over gross revenues over a 20-year period. So that's significant. And compared that with, we have two successful authorizations at Ramhead and Corrib South, which contain indigenous gas. The value, the maximum high case value at today's prices of the reserves in the ground that are yet to be produced or yet to be de-risked is something in the order of 130 billion euros. So it kind of puts it in perspective as what's at stake here with these escalating prices. The cost and the value of these assets are going up and up and up. And, you know, the world is fueled by greed as well, financial greed as well as other forms of greed. So this is not really a an environment that is very stable going forward for financial investment. We have to get it under control.
How can Magma help Ireland move to a hydrogen economy?
So our kind of focus is on the energy transition. We're not focused on 2050 because we don't believe we can get to 2050 without a sustainable energy transition. And the ability to have more gas, although it initially sounds, well, you're going to rely on more fossil fuel, albeit a cleaner form of fossil fuel compared to oil and coal, means that effectively you can generate more electricity, particularly in the summer months when the demand is satisfied by renewable energy and there's no market for the proposed 5 or 9 new gas-fired power plants that the energy minister has proposed well, not the energy minister, the DECC minister has proposed in Ireland. That electricity could be used to generate hydrogen with electrolysis of water. That hydrogen can then be shipped in fuel cells, in hydrogen vehicles and hydrogen trains around the country, so you don't have to connect into the grid, which is the problem at the present. And it would replace gas eventually and be greener in terms, because it's green hydrogen and doesn't produce CO2. So that gives you an opportunity to have a kind of hybrid transition where you're utilizing the gas to create hydrogen, which reduces CO2 emissions. So it's kind of joined up thinking, which doesn't exist at present, because unfortunately what the National Energy Summit showed was there was no mention of fossil fuel in a positive way, apart from us, in the whole summit, only negativity. But then, of course, the negativity was about collaboration amongst themselves, but not with other elements of the energy sector, which ruled out the possibility of decarbonising the economy even quicker by using gas. No commercial models were presented at the summit. The stated objective of 2030 for significant wind power can't be met because they can't get the turbines, even if they place the orders now until 2029. They can't make the financial investment decisions because they can't connect to the air grid, the electricity grid. They can't roll out the renewables quicker because of the regulatory issues. So some of the people have had 7 years waiting on planning permission, so it doesn't always affect the oil and gas industry. So there's a total lack of realism as to what is achievable in the near term. And this is pushing back all the climate change goals for 2050 right now and delaying reaching that target in 2050. So some people need to sort of grow up and get real and understand that there's an energy transition. And this word, I don't think many people actually mentioned the energy transition. They don't see it. And there was one classic comment was that we did manage to reduce CO2 emissions in 2021. Well done, round of applause, during COVID. So that means you lock down the entire population, you put businesses out of business, you create a mental health problem, you delay cancer treatment, you run a lot of people out of employment, and that you reduce CO2 emissions. That's great. Is that what we're going to do until 2050? Is that the plan? Oh, and by the way, just one fatal flaw in the plan. CO2 emissions are going up in Ireland because they're burning coal now instead of gas for money point. So need to get a degree of realism here, both at political level and at ground roots level, that an energy transition is vital to deliver the targets for 2050. Without that, it will never happen.
Thank you, Paul, for your insights. And I think you may have just touched on this, but it's our final question for today. Talking of the National Energy Summit, how did they inadvertently make the case for Magma and the energy transition?
Absolutely. I kind of probably preempted that question with the last comment. I think it was clear from the Energy Summit, from an unbiased point of view of sitting outside the renewables. I am biased because I'm in a different sector of the energy sector, but that there wasn't enough presented to give anybody any confidence that even the short-term goals would be achieved. So the problem at present is getting the financial investment into renewables because of the regulatory delays and the fact that nobody can place orders for equipment until you have financial approval of your project. So it's kind of a vicious circle. And I think right that all of us collaborate, and collaboration means involving those sectors of the fossil fuel industry that have experience, expertise, and can contribute to decarbonisation. Right now, we seem to have gone back to the Middle Ages with a bunch of witchfinder generals running around, seeking out those interested in fossil fuel or anything to do with fossil fuel, and basically demonizing them. So that's not a way to get through the energy transition and get to 2050. So the message is MagMel can help. MagMel it can contribute to the solution, and it's not creating the problem. And people need to be inclusive and collaborate on that basis. We're prepared to collaborate, but we're not prepared to be demonized by the witchfinder generals, I'm afraid.
Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
And thank you for watching Flagstaff TV.